Imagine spending 3 years paying someone's rent, buying their furniture, and even filling their fridge when they had nothing to eat, only to discover you weren't special enough to be invited to their wedding. What would you do? That's exactly what happened to me. I picked up the phone, ready to ask my son, Daniel, when the big day was. Before I could even get the words out, his wife Clara gave me a smile so sharp it could cut glass and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Special people. That phrase froze me to the core. I had been their safety net for years, and yet in a single sentence, I was told I didn't count. And here's the thing, those 4 words wouldn't just sting that day. They'd come back to haunt them in ways they never expected. I stood there in my own living room, clutching the phone like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. Clara sprawled comfortably across the sofa I had paid for in the house I had helped them furnish. And in my closet, a pale pink dress still hanging with the tags on, along with the shoes I had carefully picked to wear at their wedding. I had imagined how I'd look in the photos in which I would never appear. I had even saved $1,000 for their wedding gift, planned the menu for a small celebration afterward, and called my sister Nora, bubbling with excitement. But instead of joy, everything collapsed in seconds with those 4 poisoned words. And later, when I sat down and finally calculated how much I had poured into their lives, the total would leave me in shock. Daniel eventually mumbled, "Mom, it was just small, just the two of us and witnesses." But I knew he was lying. I saw the photos online, Clara's parents smiling beside them, her siblings toasting with champagne, her wearing a white dress I had unknowingly helped finance. And if you think that was the worst betrayal, wait until you hear what happened exactly 1 week later when Clara called me again, not with arrogance this time, but with desperation in her voice. That's when everything started to change. Have you ever loved someone so much that you kept giving even when every part of you knew you were getting nothing back? That was me. For years. I lived as though I was walking on eggshells, carefully choosing every word, every gesture, every gift, praying for just a crumb of affection from my son, Daniel. I played the role of the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider, and all the while they treated me as if I were invisible. But the phrase "only special people" had woken something in me, something I didn't even realize had been asleep for far too long. That night, when I sat on my bed and finally cried, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of fury. Fury for all the years I'd endured humiliation in silence. Fury for believing that money could buy love. I thought about everything I had poured into them: rent, food, gifts, emergencies. At first, I guessed it was maybe $20,000, but when I finally sat down with my checkbook and the bank statements the next morning, the true number nearly made me sick. I woke up different that day. Colder, yes, but clearer too. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the same tired eyes, the same lines carved by years of giving without receiving. But beneath that, I saw something else: steel, determination. And for the first time in decades, I put myself first. I brewed my coffee like I had every morning for 40 years. But instead of waiting for Daniel's call or dreading Clara's requests, I sat at the kitchen table, spread out the bills, and did what I should have done years ago. I counted: rent alone, $18,000, groceries and supplies, $7,200, birthday and holiday gifts, $3,000, Clara's medical emergencies, the car loan they never paid back, the air conditioner, the furniture. By the time I was done, the number stared back at me in black ink: $33,400. That was the true cost of my blind generosity. $33,400 taken from my retirement, from the inheritance my husband left me, from the life I was supposed to live in peace. And the cruelest part, after all of that, I was still just a stranger at my own son's wedding. But as I stared at that number, one thought burned brighter than the rest. This was only the beginning of the fight. When the phone rang and Daniel's name flashed on the screen, I let it buzz. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Clara this time. I ignored that too. Finally, a text. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." But I didn't reply. Instead, I went for a walk. Not to the bank, not to the store, not to the pharmacy for Clara's medication. This walk was for me, and me alone. As I passed the park where Daniel once held my hand as a child, I asked myself the question that had been clawing at my chest. When did I start confusing love with money? Have you ever walked into a bank and realized you were closing the door on the life you'd been funding? That was the moment everything changed for me. I paused outside the branch where I'd sent automatic transfers for years. Through the glass, Mr. Hale, the branch manager, caught my eye and waved. He'd seen every single transfer clear my account, day after day, month after month. He had watched my savings shrink so their apartment could stay warm. I'd known him long enough to trust his face, so I went straight to his office. "Mr. Hale," I said, steadying my voice, "I need to cancel the automatic transfers." He blinked, surprised. For 3 years, those payments had been as regular as sunrise. "Are you sure?" he asked, concern in his eyes, more concern than I'd seen from my own son lately. And in that tiny question was everything I'd been waiting to hear, permission to stop. While he worked the cancellations, my phone became a buzzing chorus. Daniel, Clara, Daniel again, like radar finding its missing fuel line. I turned it off. When Mr. Hale slid the final papers across the desk, he hesitated. "I hope no one's pressuring you to do this," he said softly. His worry landed on me like a benediction. A stranger who'd watched my account knew my value better than my family did. I answered, calm but certain, "No, Mr. Hale. I'm not being pushed." I finally stopped pushing myself. Walking out of that bank, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd left a heavy suitcase full of false obligations behind. For the first time, my money was mine. No more automatic bailouts, no more being the invisible safety net for 2 adults who treated me like a resource. At home, the quiet of that new freedom lasted only a few minutes. 3 cars were parked outside my door. Daniel's, Clara's, and one I didn't recognize. Movement behind my curtains. My heart dropped. I had given them keys because I trusted them. I never imagined trust would be used like a weapon. I opened the door and found Daniel slumped on my sofa, head in his hands. Clara paced like an animal cornered, and at my dining table, an older man I didn't know rifled through my personal documents as if he owned them. "What is happening?" I asked, my voice louder than I expected. They all looked at me like I'd walked into someone else's house. Clara rushed forward, breathless. "Elena, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Parker is from the law firm we spoke to about your situation." My situation? My confusion must have shown because Daniel answered for them. "We went to the bank. They told us you canceled the transfers. You even blocked our access to your accounts." Their faces were a portrait of panic dressed up as concern. Then the lawyer stepped forward, outstretched hand, smile practiced and thin. "Mrs. Morales," he began, "I'm Mr. Parker, a family law attorney. Your children are worried about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I walked to the table, gathered my papers that he'd been rifling through without permission, and said, as calmly as I could, "These are my private documents. You have no right to look at them." Moments later, the word that would echo through the next weeks landed in the room like an accusation. Confusion. The bell tolled, but I surprised them all. "I am not confused," I said, my voice cold and steady enough to stop their chattering. "I am clearer than I have been in years. Now get out of my house. When a lawyer smiles the way mine did, it's not to help you. It's to start the paperwork that will take your life away." That smile landed in my living room like a verdict. Mr. Grant spoke with that practiced, reasonable tone lawyers use when they want you to believe they're on your side. "Mrs. Morales, We understand you feel overwhelmed, he said, folding his hands. But Daniel and Clara have a right to intervene if they believe your financial decisions are impaired. They've documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The word sounded like a joke in my throat. What behavior? Deciding to stop giving away my life savings? Choosing not to bankroll two adults who treated me like disposable help? The very idea made me laugh, a harsh, hoarse sound that surprised even me. Clara leaped up as if I'd performed some unforgivable sin. "We never treated you badly. You're part of our family," she cried. Then she let the truth slip out by accident. "Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway." There it was, naked and blunt. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an inheritance on legs, already dead in their plans. 70 years or 70 days didn't matter. I was only a ledger item. "Out," I said, pointing to the door. "All three of you, get out of my house." Daniel rose with that petulant, angry face he still resorts to when he doesn't get his way. "Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. Rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed." His voice fell into the old pattern, entitlement disguised as crisis. When Mr. Grant slid a folder across the table and said, "We've prepared documents, a power of attorney that would let Daniel and Clara manage your finances temporarily," I didn't even open it. I walked to the trash and dropped it in. The only transition happening here was theirs, out the door. Clara's tears were not humble. They were fury, wearing grief as camouflage. "You can't do this to us, Maria," she pleaded. "We made plans based on your help." Plans built on my money, I thought, not on my well-being, not on my love. Suddenly, refusing to bankroll someone's life made me a confused old woman who needed guardianship. Daniel tried to step closer. I stepped back. This was no longer the boy who ran to me after a nightmare. This was a 30-something man who saw me as an obstacle between him and comfort. "Mom, we made mistakes," he said, his voice trying to sound remorseful. "We can fix this if you just become reasonable again." Reasonable, meaning keep giving while being erased. The word tasted like bile. Mr. Grant packed his papers with the efficiency of someone used to rejection. "This is not over," he warned. "Your family has legal options. If a judge finds your decisions irrational, a court could assign guardianship." The phrase hit me like a fist. They weren't bluffing. This visit was a setup for something far worse, a legal effort to strip me of my rights. I looked Mr. Grant in the eye. "Before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who's managed her finances for 40 years, do your homework," I said slowly. I listed my life, widowhood, decades of work, raising my son alone, careful retirement planning. His smile faltered. Clara's face went cold in a way that finally showed her true self. They left with wounded dignity, the look of people unused to being told no. Daniel's last warning followed them out the door. "This will end badly for you. You'll die alone." I watched them go and felt something I hadn't felt in years, a silence that wasn't empty. It was the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep from adrenaline, not grief. I planned like a general. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. But strategic, not savage. At dawn, I dressed and went to see Mr. Lawson, the only lawyer I trusted, the man who specialized in protecting the elderly. What he called it made my blood run cold: elder financial abuse. And with that name came a plan. When you decide to lock the door on people who used you, even the hardware store can feel like a turning point. I made a list of 4 things that would mark the start of my new life: change every lock, put in cameras, open a fresh bank account they couldn't touch, and finally live for myself. That day, my first stop was the hardware store. Mr. Stone, the owner, had seen me come in for years, buying paint, screws, anything to fix Daniel and Clara's apartment. He knew me as the woman who solved other people's crises. This time, I told him something different. "Mr. Stone," I said, "change all the locks on my house. And not cheap ones, the best you've got." He blinked, surprised, but didn't pry. Sometimes a tool speaks louder than 1,000 explanations. While I sifted through heavy-duty deadbolts, his son Ethan, who installed security systems, walked in like Providence. I told him plainly, I want cameras. Full system. I don't want to worry about surprise visits anymore. Price isn't an issue. He smiled, already picturing the install. They scheduled it for the next morning. Just as I signed the receipt, my phone buzzed from an unknown number. It was Clara, calling from someone else's line because I had blocked her. Her voice was syrupy, apologetic, rehearsed. "Evelyn, please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults." "Speak," I said, dry. Her pitch was predictable. The wedding was a mistake. They wanted to make it up, a dinner, cooked together like old times. It was the same script. Only now there was an ask woven between the lines. "How much rent do you owe?" I asked bluntly. Silence, then sheepish. 2 months. $1,000. She tried to patch her plea with heartstrings. "We miss you in our lives." I cut to the bone. "Do you miss me or my money?" Her answer was a humiliating honesty. Both. That line landed like a confirmation stamp on everything I'd feared. When had love become an invoice? "No more," I told her. "For 3 years you treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me, ignored me, humiliated me, and then insulted me. There is no please. You made the choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine." I hung up and turned the phone off. The day belonged to me. I didn't spend the afternoon planning how to fix them. I spent it reclaiming myself. I walked into Cynthia's salon, the appointment I'd canceled for them a dozen times, and let her spoil me. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. I sank into the chair and realized how reflexively guilty I'd felt when spending $1 on myself. Today, guilt didn't fit. While Cynthia told me about her kids and dreams, real, ordinary life that didn't revolve around emergency handouts, I watched the woman in the mirror who wasn't apologizing for taking space. "You look beautiful," Cynthia said when she was done. "More than that, you look free." I let the word land. Home that afternoon, my pulse jumped at an unfamiliar car in front of my house. I expected confrontation. Instead, an older woman sat on my porch steps, coffee in hand. "Mrs. Morales?" she asked when I stepped out. "I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. I heard voices yesterday, and I was worried. Is everything all right?" Her worry cut deeper than Clara's calls. A stranger cared more than my own son. I invited her in, made coffee, and for the first time in a long while, felt the relief of being seen. That simple concern seeded something I'd need for the days ahead, quiet allies who would stand with me when the walls they planned to build closed in. A stranger's cup of coffee changed everything. Sometimes the mercy of a neighbor is the first stitch in a wound's healing. "Come in, Margaret." "I'll make the coffee," I said, and when I poured it, we both sat down like two conspirators about to confess. I told her everything about the secret wedding, the icy line only special people, the months of transfers, the lawyer rifling through my papers. Margaret listened the way people who have lived long listen, without interruption, with the patience that makes you tell the truth to yourself. When I finished, her eyes filled with tears. "Evelyn," she said, "you did the right thing. 5 years ago, I did the same with my daughter. I thought it was my duty to finance her life. I thought she wouldn't love me unless I gave." Her voice trembled on the memory. At first, it was a nightmare, threats, guilt, emotional blackmail. But 6 months later, she called, not for money, but to say she was sorry. Margaret's story planted a seed. Sometimes cutting them off is the only way to force a true reweaving of the relationship. "Do you think Daniel and Clara will understand one day?" I asked, searching for comfort. "Maybe," she answered honestly. "Maybe not. But that's not your responsibility anymore. Your responsibility is to live those words landed like a benediction." That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without tallying their rent in my head. I slept thinking about myself, not about what I owed them. The next morning at 8, Ethan and Mr. Stone arrived to change the locks and install the cameras. While they worked, my phone lit up with unknown numbers, Clara trying other lines, Daniel leaving pleading texts. But I had learned a new skill, letting the phone ring. "This system will give you peace of mind," Ethan said as he adjusted a camera. "You can see from your phone who's at your house. If someone breaks in, the police get an alert." I smiled at the irony, installing a security system to protect myself from my own child, but felt the relief of a practical boundary. Between the drills and the wiring, I called my sister Rosa in Chicago. We hadn't talked properly in months. Our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family updates. I told her everything, then waited. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but steady. "Evelyn, it was about time," she said. "Every time we talked, you bragged about what you gave, as if love could be measured in dollars. And I've seen Daniel at family gatherings. He never said, 'I miss my mom,' or 'I love my mom.' It was always, 'My mom bought this,' or 'My mom paid for that.'" Her next sentence landed like a bucket of ice water. "Clara always spoke about you in the future tense. When Evelyn is no longer here, we'll remodel the house, or when we inherit, we'll invest." They weren't planning with you in mind. They were planning around your absence. That revelation changed everything. While I'd been trying to buy happiness for others, they were quietly mapping out a life that began the moment I was gone. The truth hurt, but it also cleared the fog. I finished my coffee, set the cup down, and watched the installers through the window. The cameras blinked to life. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. And for the first time in a long time, I was preparing to protect what was mine. Sometimes the proof that you made the right choice comes in the voice of someone who's already survived the same wound. After I hung up with Rosa, I sat at my kitchen table and let the facts settle like dust. 35 years of single parenting, decades married to a man who loved me, and 3 years of financing 2 grown adults who now treated me like a $100,000 obstacle. As I stared at the ceiling, the doorbell chimed, and Margaret stood there on my porch with a steaming mug and that steady kindness I'd already come to rely on. "Come in," I said. She handed me the coffee and listened as I laid everything out again. The secret wedding, the insults, the lawyer rifling through my documents. When I finished, Margaret's eyes filled. "Evelyn," she said, "you did the right thing." I cut my daughter off 5 years ago. At first, it was hell. Threats, guilt trips, constant calls. But 6 months later, she called to apologize. We rebuilt a relationship based on love, not invoices. Her story planted a small, stubborn seed of hope. Endings can loop back into something real. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" I asked. She didn't promise a fairy tale. Maybe yes, maybe no. But that's not your job anymore. Your job is to live. That sentence felt like permission. I spent the afternoon doing something I hadn't allowed myself for years. I went to Robert's grave. The cemetery was quiet and gentle, the kind of quiet that makes your chest soften. His headstone was dusty, the flowers wilted. I sat on the grass and talked to him like he was in the next room. "Robert," I said, "I lost myself trying to keep everyone else whole." Not anymore. I cleaned the grave, replaced the flowers, and for an hour I let peace sit with me instead of panic. When I returned, the cameras picked up 3 cars outside. My heart still jumped, but this time I was ready. Daniel, Clara, and 2 strangers I didn't recognize paced on my lawn, pointing and talking. I called Mr. Carter. "Don't get out of the car," he said. "I'll be there, and I'll call the police." Minutes later, Mr. Carter and 2 patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers speak to them. I watched Daniel gesticulate angrily. Clara cried, but her tears no longer moved me. An officer approached and said, "Ma'am, you can come out safely. We'll see they leave." As I stepped down, Daniel shouted across the street, "Mom, you can't call the police on your own son." I answered with a calm that surprised me. Family doesn't break into homes. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits to take my money. Family doesn't treat me like an ATM. Clara screamed about bills and co-signed loans. Mr. Carter stepped forward. Any future communication is through my office, he said. And before you make collection threats, speak to your attorney. My client has complete documentation of 3 years of voluntary payments. I watched them drive away, angry and defeated, but not beaten. For the first time, I felt something I'd not felt in ages: confident. They hadn't won. I had lawyers, friends, and a clarity I'd only just discovered. As the patrol cars disappeared down the street, I breathed in the quiet and felt it settle, a different kind of silence. Not loneliness, freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. When the government shows up at your door with a clipboard and a smile, it doesn't feel like protection. It feels like an ambush. The night before, Margaret had invited me for dinner. I'd sat at her table watching her daughter chat and laugh with her in a way I'd once dreamed of with Daniel. No guilt trips, no hidden invoices, just love. For the first time in weeks, I'd gone to bed with a little hope, but by Friday morning, that hope was tested. The cameras showed Daniel and Clara circling my house in their car, sometimes parking, sometimes idling like hunters waiting for the right moment. Mr. Carter told me to document every pass, every visit. It would only strengthen our case. Still, the sight made my stomach knot. Then the doorbell rang. On my screen, a young woman stood polished and professional, folder in hand. She wasn't family, and she wasn't a neighbor. My instinct screamed this wasn't a social call. "Good morning, Mrs. Evelyn Morales," she said when I cracked open the door. "I'm with the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be at risk, so I need to conduct a wellness check." My blood turned cold. Daniel and Clara had escalated their campaign. It wasn't just lawyers anymore. They'd dragged the government into their story. I asked for ID, and she showed me one that looked official: Miss Schmidt, social worker. Once inside, she pulled out her form and began in a calm voice. "We've received reports of significant changes in your financial behavior. You've cut off communication with your family. You've shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems, and you've refused medical and legal help from your loved ones." Every word was designed to paint me as unstable. I could almost see Clara's hand in the phrasing. It was her specialty. Twist the facts until concern sounded like control. "Miss Schmidt," I said evenly, "I want to call my lawyer before I answer questions." She countered with the line abusers always use: "If you have nothing to hide, why not cooperate?" My jaw tightened. "I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait or come back with a court order." Mr. Carter arrived within 20 minutes. The moment he saw Miss Schmidt, his face hardened. "Do you have a court order?" he asked. "My client is under legal representation." Any unauthorized questioning is harassment. Ms. Schmidt faltered, insisting she was acting on concerned family reports. Mr. Carter cut her off. "The same family that broke into her house? The same family that tried to force a power of attorney? The same family that drained $33,400 over 3 years while excluding her from her own son's wedding?" He opened his folder and placed it on the table. "Here's the real report: financial abuse, emotional blackmail, systematic exclusion. If anyone should be investigated, it's not my client." Ms. Schmidt read the documents, her professional confidence slipping. Finally, she turned to me. "Mrs. Morales, do you manage your own finances?" "Yes," I said, firm. "I can show you my bank statements, investments, taxes, all in order. I live independently. I drive, I maintain my home, I see friends, I take only vitamins and aspirin." Mr. Carter added, "She's undergone medical exams as part of our case. She's in perfect health, mentally and physically." Ms. Schmidt closed her folder. "Based on what I've reviewed, I see no indication of risk. I'll close this case." Relief washed over me, but so did something else: anger. My own son had tried to weaponize the system against me. to have me declared unfit in order to claim my life while I was still living it. They'd failed this time, but the war wasn't over. Betrayal has layers. Just when you think you've hit the bottom, someone you trusted hands your enemies the shovel to dig deeper. After the social worker left, Mr. Carter and I sat in silence, the kind of silence that weighs more than words. Finally, he spoke. Evelyn, they're not done. Daniel and Clara are desperate. They're spending money they don't have, trying to have you declared incompetent. The phrase made my stomach knot. Declared incompetent. Assigned a guardian. My own son holding the keys to my money, my house, my future. Can they do that? I asked, my voice thinner than I wanted. It's hard, Mr. Carter admitted, but if they find the right judge and a psychiatrist willing to play along, it's possible. That afternoon, I called Rosa. She didn't sugarcoat it. Do you see how far they'll go for money? Risking their reputations, burning family ties, lying under oath, all for access to your account. They've shown you who they are. Her words hurt, but they freed me too. There would be no reconciliation. Not now. Not ever. That evening, Margaret showed up with reinforcements. Her friends from the garden club, women who carried the same scars. Over dinner, they shared their own stories. Maria, who cut off her brother, Carmen, who severed ties with her daughter, Alfreda, who rewrote her will when her grandchildren started calling her their retirement plan. I confessed what hurt most. Not the money, the lie of love. Alfreda, wise at 80, leaned in. True love can't be bought. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words landed like balm on a raw wound. That night, under the stars, I felt something new. Freedom didn't taste like fear anymore. It tasted like possibility. For a month, I lived in that possibility. Breakfast in peace, lunches with friends, painting in the afternoons. My life was finally mine. I thought the war was over. Until Mr. Carter arrived one Thursday, face grim. Evelyn, he said, Daniel and Clara have filed a lawsuit. They're petitioning the court to declare you mentally incompetent. The words hit harder than any slap. They've filed evidence, he continued. 3 witnesses claim you behave erratically. They've submitted supposed unpaid doctor's bills and say you hoard medication. They even cite your refusal to take a psychiatric exam as proof of decline. My heart raced. Lies stacked on lies. Who are the witnesses? I asked. He scanned his papers. Clara, of course. A neighbor, Mr. Davis. And your pharmacist, Mr. Green. My blood froze. Mr. Green had known me for years. He'd sold me nothing stronger than aspirin. Why would he turn on me? I insisted we go straight to the pharmacy. When I confronted him, his face flushed scarlet. Mrs. Morales, I didn't know, he stammered. He explained that Clara had come weeks earlier, spinning a story about my strange behavior. She'd pressed him for details, twisted his words, then slid a document under his nose. I thought it was for insurance paperwork, he said, shame in his eyes. Mr. Green, I said, I need you to put in writing exactly what happened, that I take no prescription medications, that I buy only vitamins and aspirin, and that you signed without understanding. He nodded, eager to undo the damage. Clara had manipulated him like a pawn, but now that pawn had become a witness in my favor. As I left the pharmacy, I realized they were willing to forge, manipulate, and fabricate to steal my life. But now I had proof of their deceit. The courtroom was coming, and I would not walk in unarmed. Some battles aren't fought with fists or guns. They're fought with signatures, false testimonies, and crocodile tears. And as I was about to learn, those can cut even deeper. After the pharmacy, Mr. Carter and I went straight to confront the second so-called witness, Mr. Davis, my sour-faced neighbor across the street. He opened the door with hostility dripping from his tone. What do you want? He barked. Mr. Carter kept his voice calm. I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. That's right, Davis sneered. That woman's crazy. Installing cameras like she's in a war zone, having strangers over all the time, screaming at her family in the street. I wanted to laugh. Cameras installed after my house was invaded. Strangers? They were friends who had finally given me support. Screaming? That was me protecting my home from Daniel and Clara. Every truth twisted into a weapon. When I tried to explain, Davis cut me off. That's what a crazy person would say. There was no reasoning with him. His statement wasn't built on facts, it was built on malice. That night, Mr. Carter laid out the stakes. Evelyn, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Moore is one of the best. She'll confirm what we already know. You are fully competent. But doubt whispered in my ear. What if the judge has already been bribed? What if this whole thing is stacked against me? The system isn't perfect, Mr. Carter admitted, but we have evidence. We have truth, and that counts for something. The next day, I sat across from Dr. Moore, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s. For 2 hours, she tested me. Memory, logic, finances, problem-solving. I answered every question with clarity, every puzzle with ease. At the end, she looked me in the eye. Mrs. Morales, your cognitive function is not just intact, it's exceptional. You are far from incompetent. What you are facing is classic elder financial exploitation. Her words validated me and cut me at the same time. Validation because I wasn't crazy. Pain because the lawsuit wasn't paranoia. It was very real. That afternoon, Margaret rallied the garden club. When I told them about the lawsuit, outrage filled the room. We'll testify, Maria promised. We've seen with our own eyes how sharp you are, Cynthia added. Alfreda, 80 years old and wise, took my hands. Renate, greedy children have pulled this trick for generations, but you have something they don't: proof, support, and an army of women who won't let you fall. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't walking into battle alone. That night, I wept, not out of fear, but grief. I said goodbye to the son I thought I had, to the illusion of family love, to the lie that affection could be bought. What was left wasn't sadness. It was iron resolve. 3 weeks later, I put on my best black suit, looked in the mirror, and saw a woman who refused to be erased. Mr. Carter reminded me, the burden of proof is on them. Remember that. At the courthouse, Daniel avoided my gaze. Clara, however, stared straight at me, eyes cold, dressed in black as though she were at a funeral. Maybe she was. Our family's. Their lawyer painted me as a paranoid, confused old woman manipulated by scheming outsiders. Every word was polished, rehearsed, dripping with false concern. Then came the witnesses. Clara took the stand first, tears rolling down her face like a seasoned actress. Your Honor, she's changed so much. She's paranoid. She's isolated herself. We just want to take care of her. The performance could have won her an Oscar. But when Mr. Carter cross-examined, the cracks began to show. When was the last time you called Evelyn without asking for money? She hesitated. Well, we always talked about many things. A date, Mrs. Alvarez. Just one date. I don't remember. And is it true you married Daniel without inviting her? And when she asked, you told her only special people were invited? Her face flushed red. That was taken out of context. And what context makes that sentence acceptable? Mr. Carter pressed. She had no answer. How do you prepare yourself to watch your own child raise his hand, swear to tell the truth, and then lie about you in front of a judge? That moment broke something inside me, but it also set me free. When Daniel, my only son, took the stand, my chest tightened. This was the boy I had carried, the boy I had raised alone after Robert's death, the boy I had given my entire life to. And yet, the words that came out of his mouth didn't belong to my son. My mother has always been generous, he said, his voice flat, but lately she's become erratic, irrational, manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her. Mr. Carter didn't waste a second. Mr. Morales, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? I don't know the exact amount. Does $33,400 sound familiar? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. She's always been generous. And how many times have you visited your mother without asking for money? Silence. Deafening, humiliating silence. One by one, their so-called witnesses crumbled under cross-examination. Mr. Davis admitted his accusations were based only on what he saw from across the street. Dr. Lehman's claims of mental decline were destroyed by the flawless evaluation from Dr. Moore. Even my pharmacist, Mr. Green, testified how he had been tricked into signing a misleading statement. Meanwhile, our witnesses painted the opposite picture. Mr. Summer from the hardware store, Eleanor, my garden club friends, all testified to my clarity, my independence, my strength. Piece by piece, the truth outweighed their lies. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with every year of my life behind me, every sacrifice, every humiliation, every penny I had given away. My voice did not shake as I told my story. "Why did you stop supporting your son and daughter-in-law?" Mr. Carter asked. "Because I realized what I was receiving wasn't love," I said, my words echoing through the courtroom. It was a commercial transaction disguised as family. My money was welcome. I was not. When asked if I regretted my decision, I answered only that it took me so long. The lawyers gave their final arguments. Their attorney painted me as a paranoid old woman. Mr. Carter's rebuttal cut like a blade. This is not incompetence. This is a woman finally refusing to be abused. Judge Miller left to deliberate. 2 hours felt like 2 years. When he returned, his face was unreadable. "After reviewing the evidence," he began, "it is clear Mrs. Evelyn Morales is fully competent. The request for guardianship is denied." The words washed over me like sunlight breaking through a storm. I hadn't just won a trial, I had won back my freedom, my dignity, my life. Outside the courthouse, Clara's eyes burned with hatred. Daniel looked at me once, and for a flicker, I saw regret. But it was far too late. That night, Eleanor filled my home with laughter, food, and friends. "Evelyn," Elfrida told me, "today you didn't just win in court, you won yourself back." 3 months later, I sold the old house that had been filled with their shadows and moved into a bright apartment near the city. Half of my money I donated to organizations fighting elder abuse. The rest? I used to live. I traveled through Europe, painted again, volunteered, laughed freely. Daniel and Clara disappeared from my life. I heard whispers that they'd downsized, that she had taken her first real job. Maybe adversity would finally teach them what my generosity never could: the value of independence. Some nights I sit on my balcony and look at the stars. I think of the woman I was a year ago, afraid, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is gone. My name is Evelyn Morales. I'm 72 years old, and I've learned the most important lesson of my life. True love can't be bought, and freedom is worth every fight. If this story moved you, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join me next time. Looking back now, it almost feels like I lived 2 lives. For years, I was the invisible provider, handing over money, time, and energy, hoping it would buy me love. Instead, it only bought me silence, disrespect, and betrayal. But in losing that illusion, I found something far more valuable: myself. I gained clarity, I gained peace, and I gained the kind of strength that comes only when you stop begging for scraps of affection and start valuing your own worth. Family isn't defined by blood, but by respect. Love isn't measured in dollars, but in the way you're treated when you have nothing left to give. And if you ever find yourself in my shoes, I want you to remember this: freedom, dignity, and self-respect are never too expensive. You don't have to buy your place in anyone's life. The only person whose love you must always invest in is yourself. So now I'll leave you with a question. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join me for more stories about resilience, self-worth, and the kind of strength we often don't discover until we're forced to. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is finally living free.